due respect to your wife too, and every other person watching. Once again, we're here to celebrate the birthday of Olaoluwa, and I would have enjoyed us even celebrating his birthday before my speech because it's the reason for our gathering. And I hope there's a cake for him for us to celebrate this birthday and let the cake be distributed um, through the Zoom as well. So once again, thank you for the honor to share. I'm having a problem sending out my slides, but to avoid that, I will just go on until it comes on, so we don't spend time waiting endlessly. Topic of our message today is managing expectations, cerebral palsy as a case study. And this has become very important because most of us here have either heard of or have related with somebody having to do with cerebral palsy all our lives. By the way, I am just a medical doctor with over 39 years experience, and when they say family practice, general practice, pediatrics, I don't think I'm anywhere. I just want to take the position of being a passionate medical doctor who wants to make a change in our environment. I'm still waiting for my slide to come on. Have I been made a co-host, or are we still okay?
You can share your slides now. Try and share your slides.
I'll do that now. All right. So, talking about managing expectations, many of us, our minds quickly go to managing before we even think of expectations. And we'll find out that there's always a need in life to manage people, manage materials, and manage even circumstances that we'll find ourselves in. So the first thing that will come to our mind straight away is, what is managing? Managing is to make the best use of resources to achieve set objectives. That's what it's all about. And each time we think of expectations, all of us already know what expectations are. In expectations, we look forward to something. Our minds are focused on either getting married, getting pregnant, having a child, relocating as is a common practice now. And we put all our focus on that. At the end of the day, we find out that it doesn't come to pass. Either we're not able to relocate, or we attempted relocating and we got bounced back. But that does not stop us from continuing to expect. Now, what do we do when expectations don't pan out? What do we do when we look forward to something, we pray, we think hard, we plan how to get it done, and at the end of the day, we find ourselves not able to get it done? What do? Do we get discouraged? Do we just call it a day and quit, or what? So I will just go on these over this slide. And so in managing expectations, therefore, there's always something you look forward to as due, proper, necessary, feared. An expectation could be something you are fearing could happen, or it could be something you are hoping for. Expectations also come with them attitudes of anticipation or hope. So people that have expectations, they tend to look forward to something. And in managing expectations, we talk about the fact that, yes, everybody has expectations. Can you manage them? That's what we talk of, the degree of skill that you have. These are skill sets that you ought to have achieved over life, either by nature, by nurturing, by schooling, or by even training. All these skills go a long way to help you able to manage not just expectations, whatever situations you find in life. So we look at cerebral palsy today as a case study. But before we look at that, we look at the background of why we think of cerebral palsy. The first thing is a disease. And expectations are not necessarily because of diseases. You could be expected to get married, and the marriage may fail. So, as was said earlier on, I happen to be a pastor, and I tend to refer a few times to the Bible. For those of us who don't believe in the Bible, apologies, but just use it for the sake of explaining what we are looking at today. In the book of 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 13, a prophet appeared to David. His name was Nathan. And David had committed a grievous offense, and he told him that the Lord had forgiven him, but somebody will die. David took it like that, and suddenly in verse 15, the Lord sent a deadly disease to his son, his child. And David's child became very, very sick. And David, in verse 16 of 2 Samuel chapter 12, begged God to spare the child. The Bible says he went without food and lay all night on the bare ground, asking God to spare the child. And that's where we look at it, bargaining and asking ourselves, God, I don't want this to happen to me. I don't want that to happen to me. So all night, David was on the bare ground praying. The elders of his household pleaded with him to get up and eat with them, but they refused. On the seventh day, the child died. David's advisors were afraid to tell him because he wouldn't listen to reason why the child was ill, they said. What drastic thing will you do when we tell him the child is dead? Verse 19. When David saw them whispering, he realized what had happened. He now asked, is the child dead? They said the child is dead. Verse 20. David got up from the ground. That means he came to accept the reality that a child had died. And this was a person who was so close to God that he begged God all day and all night, and yet the child died. He got up from the ground, washed himself, put on lotions, changed his clothes, and the Bible says he went to the tabernacle and worshipped the Lord. After that, he returned to the palace and was served food and he ate, managing expectations. His expectations apparently were dashed, but that did not stop him from getting up from the ground. So David had some skill set already of going beyond his challenges, taking a shower, going to church, came back home and ate. So his advisors were amazed in verse 21. And they said, we don't understand you, sir. While the child was still living, you wept and refused to eat. But now that the child is dead, you've stopped your mourning and you're eating again. David replied, I fasted and wept while the child was alive. For I said, perhaps the Lord will be gracious to me and let the child live. But why should I fast when the child is dead? Can I bring him back again? I'll go to him one day, but he cannot return to me. Finally, verse 24. Then David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and slept with her again. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and David named him Solomon. What have we seen here? We have seen the process of expectations being dashed and the process of getting up and moving on with his life. One of the challenges that we come across every day in the hospital and in private practice is this sense of entitlement. Entitlement. Entitlement is that demanding attitude that says, I deserve it now, even if I haven't earned it or I cannot pay for it. Entitlement is when an individual perceives himself as deserving of unearned privileges. These are the people who believe life owes them something, a reward, a measure of success, a particular standard of living. I grew up hearing this from my dad as a young boy. Nobody owes you anything. Nobody owes you anything. It sounded very odd, you know. Nobody owes you anything. Even God does not owe you anything. Even if they do, they can change their minds. The truth is, David had a sense of entitlement. He felt things could be resolved. Having a sense of entitlement is a malignant form of self-love because it often harms the people around us, which indirectly harms us in the long run. A sense of entitlement is established and upheld by the belief that we are the center of the universe. And if the universe doesn't meet our needs and desires, all hell will break loose. And this has been a very painful thing as we look at the world today, church, everywhere. The common message we continue to hear is that you were born to be great. You are going to be great. Nothing can stop you from getting great. And people have challenges coming to terms with the reality of what happens to them every day. Because the other day, the pastor just said, it's going to be great. And the next thing he found out was that he failed an exam. He lost his job. And it's like, is God lying, or how do I place this? What do we do when God doesn't seem to have answered our prayers? What do we do when it appears as if everything, all hell has broken loose, and things are not going the way we want them to go. And that's why the simple story here about David becomes very, very pertinent. The way he handled it, the way he moved on with his life, and the way he refused to allow the death of his child to take hold of him. Yes, he mourned for some days, but he got up and he moved on. Cerebral palsy is a brain injury or a brain malformation that occurs while the brain is developing. It could take place before, during, or after birth. As a result of this brain damage or during brain development, there's a loss in a child's muscle control, a loss in muscle coordination, a loss in muscle tone and reflex, a loss in posture and balance. Finally, it impacts the fine motor or gross motor skills and oral motor skills. Now listen, every case of cerebral palsy is unique to the individual. This is due in part to the type of injury, the extent of the injury, and the timing of injury to the developing brain. The brain damage that causes cerebral palsy is a result of either prenatal, that is, before the child was born, disturbance of brain cell migration, could be a result of prenatal poor myelination, perinatal around the period of birth, immediately after birth, brain cell death, or postnatal, non-functional or inappropriate connections between the brain cells, like in trauma, infections, asphyxia, that damage connections developing in the brain. All this grammar, we now look at outcomes. In cerebral palsy, once the damage has occurred, there is no cure. I repeat, once the damage has occurred, there is no cure. Some parents have the expectation that the child will improve back to normal. Though rehabilitation is very useful in improving motor functions, ambulation, and independence, nevertheless, this depends on the severity of the condition. For most, life will be a new normal, or sometimes uncoordinated movements and clumsiness in doing day-to-day activities. When you hear the news, a mother in labor, a father waiting by for the child to be born, hearing the news that your child has cerebral palsy can be a frightening experience. Many people will be unable to take everything in at first. If you are alone in the consultation room, you have to ask. At times you may need a relative to come in or a friend to hear everything the doctor has to say, because it could be so overwhelming that it's like, I don't believe what this doctor is saying. At times, you may have to ask the doctor for a follow-up appointment after birth. Go home, stay for some days. When you come for the postnatal visit, the reality begins to dawn on you. And you have to ask the doctors a question. What support is available for me or to me? At times they may refer you to a palliative care team. At times they refer you to different other teams in the hospital that can help the child. But you will have to come to terms with the fact that your child has an irreversible condition. You have to find someone to talk to. Your priest, your friend, your relative, someone to talk to. It's always very important once the news of cerebral palsy comes, because the expectation was that you're going to have a child that is just beautiful, wonderful, and you are hit with a child with deformities. Some people might not want to talk about it initially. This is normal, because you are praying that things should not be like that. You are praying, you're going for night vigils, all kinds of meetings, meeting pastors, meeting priests, meeting babalawos, meeting all kinds of people, because you can't just accept what you're being told. Then you have to live with the diagnosis, one step at a time. Why? Expectations continue to be at the background this thing is going to work out. It's only a matter of time. Maybe you will catch up. You wake up tomorrow morning, voila, like the French will say, the child is normal again and walking. What you'll be dealing with at that time can be so overwhelming, but you may have to make it feel less so by thinking about it in smaller pieces. If you allow everything to overwhelm you, you may run mad. So write down your worries at those periods and begin to look after yourself and look up to God. For parents who just found out that their child has cerebral palsy, like I said, it's overwhelming. After a month, they come to terms with it and they're able to cope with it. Some parents might even feel their world is crashing down on them and give up. At times, throw the baby in the dustbin. So panic, fear, even a little anger are common reactions. The most important thing for parents to realize is that cerebral palsy diagnosis is not the end of the world. In fact, there are countless business leaders, musicians, celebrities, artists, designers, and more who have gone on to lead exceptional lives despite their CP diagnosis. So the first step sounds quite what I've been repeating since. Educate your family, your relatives, and even yourself by going through the internet, going through books, and coming to terms with reality. This is not a situation in which this is not a situation in which an ancestral curse has come on you. So you have to come to terms with the diagnosis. This is not you think. You may move into denial and say it's not true. That's acceptable. It happens everywhere. When we talk about the 5 stages of grief, first thing is anger. Denial first, then anger. Initially, you say it's not true. This cannot be, and you begin to weigh expectations. How do you manage expectations? There are about 4 people here. The CP child, and let's remember to remind ourselves that the CP child himself or herself, even as a neonate, has expectations. You know, we tend to think children have no expectations, but the Bible tells us that before you were formed, I knew you. While you are in your mother's womb, I called you by name and ordained you as a prophet to the nations. So everybody born has what you can call God-given goals in life. So the first person here is the expectations of the CP child. He too dreams of becoming great. The parents, extended family and parents can be together there. Then the medical team. Most people tend to forget that when the child is born with CP, the physicians themselves and the team are shocked, just like the parents. The management of the hospital too reacts and in some cases discuss these cases in their clinical meetings though the parents never get to know this. They search their consciences. Why did it happen? Because every time a woman is in labor, the obstetrician, the pediatrician, the nurses, everybody will be expecting the best outcome. When outcomes are dashed, expectations are hit. And doctors themselves, you may not see it on their faces. They go back to their rooms with sadness, at times they cry. Parents of the child initially go into denial, like I said, then anger, and begin to ask questions. Why us? What did we do wrong or fail to do? Did I marry the wrong person? Is it in our genes? So my child has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. Whose fault is it? Most times it is difficult to apportion blame, and the extreme feelings of guilt needs to be managed. Grief, as experienced in the loss of a loved one, is a key thing that happens in the birth of cerebral palsy. You just feel as if you lost a child. Grief is quite common in terminal illness like cancer, death, but it's there. What is grief? It's the internal feeling one experiences in reaction to the news of cerebral palsy. Prolonged grief now ensues. Prolonged grief is a reaction to loss that lasts more than 1 year, with the grief reaction affecting the sufferer's close relationships, disrupting his or her life beliefs, resulting in the sufferer experiencing ongoing longing for the irreversibility of the case. So the parents is going to grieve, and they're going to prolong grief because each time they wake up, they wish it was a dream that they can, rewind and start all over again and say, no, there was a mistake. You were sleeping, wake up, and it's a dream. Then the doctors, because treatment is difficult. In offering treatment, health practitioners need to be mindful of what is treatable, and so they have to manage the process of educating, treating, and rehabilitation. Even where treatment options exist in other climes of this world, the parents and child with CP who has seizures need to know the treatment will not guarantee eradication of the seizures. And it's so painful to know that, but you have to accept it. The expectation of complete resolution needs to be managed. The parent whose child is undergoing for physiotherapy or rehabilitation and expects the child to immediately start walking or walk perfectly is also died because you spend so much money on physiotherapy, spend so much money on all kinds of therapy, speech therapy and so on, and you get what appears like a drop in the ocean. And so the physician has to indicate very clearly, spell it out very clearly, and make the parents understand that there is limitation to therapies and interventions. I've seen people come to me and say, I've been to Luz, I've been here, I've been there, nothing is happening. And I have to remind them, this is a lifetime story. It's a journey. It's not an event. So I've talked about the parents, I've talked about the doctors, family dynamics. There's often an expectation on the part of parents that other members of the family, including the other spouse and friends, will show understanding once they're aware of the situation. The reality is that every other person has the challenges, have their own challenges too. So if you feel entitled that my in-laws will care, my colleagues at work will care, I'm going to go late to office, I'll be giving days off work, you find that it's not true. The missing link right now as I talk to you is the extended family and community support that used to exist decades ago that have gradually been broken because our children are outside the country, our husbands are in Canada, wife is in Europe, children are in America, and things like that. And grandpa is in the village, uncles are in Lagos and Kaduna. Unlike 20, 50 years ago where we all lived, where they say it takes a village. Now, it doesn't take a village now, it takes a whole world because we're no longer living together. So the challenge in managing expectations is that you don't get the support you will get before.